So when we were looking to create this class of ship, our goal was to create something that didn't look like a cruise ship, right? That's what we stated. We wanted, when you're on board, you think you're at a beautiful resort anywhere in the world. We didn't want these huge, gaudy public rooms. We didn't want these over-the-top plastic decorations. We wanted to create something that was really upscale, and we challenged Cantieri. Give us a design that does that, and they came back. Wasn't exactly this when they first came back, but something like this that we refined over the design and building phase, and we were really impressed. We said, yeah, we can do this. Now go make it happen. And I have to tell you, first off, they were great partners throughout. We worked very, very closely with them. The entire Italian government is supportive of the efforts, which obviously makes it much easier for us. Of course, we had some challenges over the 2 years. Venice, or the Venice region where the ship is being built, was ground zero for the pandemic back in March and April of 2020. But they only closed the shipyard for 6 weeks, which we thought was amazing. And then got right back to work. They had a very aggressive testing and masking program for their workers. And considering all the global supply chain challenges, you can imagine what goes in to creating a ship like this. I'll start with, where do you get the steel? Well, they got all their steel from the Mariupol plant in Ukraine. Well, that isn't happening, unfortunately. I mean, my heart goes out. I don't make any light of it at all. My heart goes out to the Ukrainian people and the terrible aggression that's happening there. I pray that it ends soon. I genuinely do. But from a business perspective, they then had to start sourcing steel from other locations, from Brazil, South Korea, and it's been a challenge. And that's just on one thing, steel. I mean, it impacted many, many other things. A lot of the components for the ship are made in Romania, right on the border with the Ukraine. So there's been some challenges there as well with workers and supplies, because they were getting their supplies through the Black Sea into the Romanian ports, not the Ukrainian ports. So, I can go on and on about the challenges, yet still, this ship is 99.99%. No, nothing ever gets to 100. 99.99% of what we envisioned. It was just a few days late, but considering those challenges that I just mentioned, we think that's an enormous feat. And I can't credit Fincantieri enough for, obviously there's some hardworking people on our side too that I give credit to, but I give credit to Fincantieri for the wonderful work they did. I think there's a short answer and a medium answer, and I'm not going to give you the long answer. The short answer, I'll start with Viva. Viva delivers next July, early August, right? Early August. She's going to be very similar to this ship, very, very similar to this ship. But I think from number 3 forward, I really got to be careful because I know what the name for number 3 is and you don't. For number 3 forward, there'll be changes, but we are committed to this premium, elegant footprint. So I don't think, if this room got a little bit bigger, and I'm not saying it is, but as an example, it might get bigger by 10 or 15%. We're not going to triple the size of a room like this. I think on the racetracks, I don't expect the racetrack to be a 4-level racetrack, if that's what you're asking, and things like that. So I think the bones will be essentially the same, because we think it's a really, really good platform, but there'll be some nice changes. I can tell you that number 3 and number 4 will not be able to use LNG because they're too far along in the developmental process. But we're currently undertaking a study for 5 and 6 to look at different fuel sources. I don't know that LNG is the answer. We're literally studying it as we speak. There are challenges with LNG. It's still a fossil fuel. It's still difficult to make on a sustainable basis, although we hear that there's potential for e-LNG, environmentally sourced LNG. But there's other sustainable fuels out there. For example, we announced, I think it was a few months back, that we joined the Ethanol Institute to look if there's a possibility for that. I actually have a call tomorrow with a consultant on board the ship to look at the potential for hydrogen and fuel cells. So we're actively involved. I make no commitments for 5 and 6. All I can tell you is that we're actively studying what we can do on 5 and 6. We've made a commitment to be zero greenhouse gas, not just carbon, but zero greenhouse gas in 2050. in 27 years, but not just, we're going to do what we're going to do and then in 2049 do this. Actually have sustainable, meetable goals, measurable, science-based goals on an annual basis to see that reduction so that we can see that. I can tell you we meet regularly about it. We're going to invest significant CapEx in the existing fleet, but ultimately the real solution is finding a environmentally friendly alternative fuel. Because we can use existing technology to reduce our footprint by 15-20%, and we are and we will. But long term is we need a sustainable fuel source, and we're going to work very closely. We're going to do our best to partner with the other large shipping companies and other cruise lines, because I think there is a little bit of benefit in numbers there. Hard for us to do that alone, but we are 100% committed to making this happen. So what we saw, and in hindsight, it's like one of those aha moments, that when we restarted, our ships were maybe 60% full, but we had crewed them at 90%, right? And we saw this interesting phenomena that when we had almost all the crew on, but only 60% of the passengers on, the guests had a better experience. And you're going to say, well, that's obvious. Okay, maybe so in hindsight. And we said, okay, well, what can we do to continue that magic, so to speak, once the ships get to 100% full, which they're already started. Our ships that are close to home in the U.S. and the Caribbean, out of Port Canaveral, Miami, New York, are pretty much running now at 100% full over the summertime. And we said, gee, this is really easy. Let's just add another 10, 15 waiters, some more bartenders, a few more cabin stewards, and we can see whether that, it's an investment, and I'll tell you, obviously there's an investment in salaries, travel for the crew, which we gladly make. The larger investment, if you think about this economically, is taking a passenger cabin out of inventory, right? Because passenger cabins are what we need to generate revenue. We're in business, right? But we did the calculus and we said, this is worth it. We're going to give this a shot. So starting in October, which is when we broadly think the ships will start regularly approaching 100%, at least in our non-exotic trades. That we're going to start increasing staff, and we hope by January we will have this new higher staff level across all 18 ships in our fleet by then, and we're going to see how it goes. And like with everything else, we're going to constantly evolve and innovate, and if we need more staff, we'll put on more staff. If it works just fine with this new elevated level, that's great too. Our goal, simply put, is to provide outstanding vacations to our guests. We have three key measurements, right, that we look at. We have a guest satisfaction score. We know how much they spend on board the ship. And as I mentioned before, the more they spend, the better time they have. And we know how often they come back, right? And these are three things that we track very, very closely. And when we hit the trifecta, it's magic. We work very closely with some of the larger investment banks in the United States. Actually, they're worldwide investment banks, to give us predictions for the future. And we just had our last board meeting a couple of weeks ago. We had Goldman Sachs in. They think the inflation is going to calm down. They think it's a short-term phenomenon, a combination of factors. I'm not an economist, so I will. That's loud. I'm not an economist, so I'm not going to go through all of it, but they believe it's a short-lived phenomenon, that things will start returning back to normal as soon as Q4. And in fact, in the United States, I think we saw negative inflation on the wholesale side last month. The last time the statistics was offered. So hopefully that's a sign. We see fuel prices starting to come down, actually quite dramatically over the last 4 to 6 weeks, if I remember correctly. So we really think it's a short-term phenomenon. We're not assuming a huge inflationary number as part of our future pricing or planning. We'll see what happens, but I don't think it's a long-term issue. I think the central banks around the world are putting in a pretty good concerted effort to try to slow down inflation while not sending the world into recession. The employment market continues to look outstanding. Most of the markets that we source our guests from. So, knock on wood, things are looking very good for 2020. The back quarter, I should say, the last quarter of 22 and into 23. We continue to be at a record book position for 23, record prices, record load factors. So we're very, very optimistic about the future.
Hi, I'm Natalie from Travel Weekly in the UK, travel trade publication. Hi. After a difficult few years, a number of other people in the cruise industry are starting to say that the sector is heading towards its best year ever. I mean, do you agree with that statement? And you're saying you're nearly back to 2019 levels. When do you think you'll start breaking records from NCL's side?
Thank you, great question. The comment I made was that the trade community was nearly back to 2019 levels, but our overall business actually is higher now than it was. So if you know, about 3 weeks ago, August 8th, I think, we made the announcement that we would allow unvaccinated guests on board the ship. I think that was long awaited and the right timing. We wanted to wait until the public health situation was in a place that we can do this. And since then, for these last 3 weeks, our bookings for 2022 are actually higher than the same weeks in 2019 across all three of our brands by a measurable amount. So we are very, very pleased with the trajectory. Now, I've learned better than to predict the future, so I'm not going to make any definitive statements here, but if current trends continue, 2023 will absolutely be a record year. But with the caveat, if current trends continue, it looks good, we're hopeful, we're going to knock on wood or whatever material this is, and we look forward to a really good future. There's a couple of things. Frank talked yesterday at the christening about this pent-up demand for travel, or some people call it revenge travel. I don't think it's true. I don't think we're getting back at anyone, but I think people really enjoy these interactions. I think it was interesting to stay at home and people go, well, maybe this isn't so bad, and then they go out in the future. They go, oh no, I really missed going out. I know I did. And of course many of our guests did. And it's interesting, some of our more loyal guests, I'm pen pals with maybe 20 or 30 of our top past guests. These are guests that maybe used to cruise once or twice a year. They're literally going every month now, which is like incredible. Like they actually get to the ships more often than I do. I'm a little jealous. I guess I have a day job, they don't. It's really great to see. And then also, we talk about experiences versus things, that people are looking for experiences. And maybe this whole social media, I shouldn't call it a phenomenon, it's real. This whole social media movement where people like to post things online. Well, isn't it super cool to post things online from Jerusalem or Mykonos or Reykjavik? Yes, some of the wonderful places we go to. I think we visit over 400 destinations around the world. So if you're going to go make a TikTok, do it right. Don't do it in your garage. I would say, I'll try to take them one at a time. Universally what we found, and I think this applies to pretty much every market in the world, that the further a guest travels, the more they value the vacation. And when a guest values the vacation more, they are willing to pay more for it, both in terms of the ticket price and then when they're on board, in terms of the activities they do on board the ship. So if someone, packs their bag and drives to the port, and that doesn't really matter whether it's Sydney, Southampton, or Miami, it's sort of universal, those guests are willing to pay less, they book closer in, and once they get on board, they don't spend very much money. And the converse is, we have this interesting statistic that the more a guest spends, the higher guest satisfaction they have, and the more likely they are to return. They have the highest repeat rate of any of our guests. And you can imagine if you're sitting in an inside cabin, I like to tell the story, and you don't book any shore excursions, and you don't get our free at sea package, and you don't do any of the onboard activities, you really got us, but you had a lousy vacation. And if a guest goes into the Haven and takes our shore excursion and takes our free at sea package and really enjoys the trip, yes, they spend a little bit more money, but they've really had a great vacation experience. They come back, they tell all their friends then come and they repeat over and over again. It's not just the highest past guest rate, but the highest referral rate as well. We like to market to those guests. We want happy guests, and happy guests are guests that have a wonderful vacation experience. In terms of Greece, listen, our guests that we source from around the world, the United States, Europe, Australia, the regions that we get most of our guests from, love Greece. So, in a typical summer, we have a ship out of Civitavecchia that goes down to Santorini and Mykonos. We have a ship out of Trieste that goes and visits Greek Isles. We have a ship home ported in Athens. I think that was the second part of your second question, which we'll continue to do for a very, very long season. I mean, starting like in late March or early April, going straight through to November, doing a lot of cruises, some round trip Athens, some Athens Istanbuls, some longer Athens that visit Israel and Egypt. So we are huge fans of the area. I think the Greek government has done a fantastic job in marketing their brand, so to speak. Obviously, they're also beautiful islands. I've been there. I think I go there, other than the year of COVID, I think I get there every year in some way, shape, or form, including when we restarted out of Greece in July 19th of last year. I was on that ship and we visited Rhodes and Crete and a few other places I forget, but all beautiful places as well. And we will continue to have Greece and the Greek Isles a large part of our deployment plans for Europe going forward. At least 3-4 ships there every summer. In terms of home porting in Australia, it's a specific, unique issue that is just to Sydney, so this wouldn't really apply to anyone else, where you have only one berth. I mean, I don't know of any major port in the world that only has one. I'm sure there's some, but one doesn't immediately come to mind. I mean, we talked about Athens. I think we can certainly get multiple ships there. You can get multiple ships in Southampton, multiple ships in Miami, multiple ships in Ciudadella and Barcelona, in pretty much every major port around the world. Sydney only allows one ship in, and the people that have been there for 20 years, tend to monopolize that space. So we have to send a ship that can fit under the Sydney Harbour Bridge. I think we only have 3 of them in the fleet. So we take the Spirit down there because she's the nicest of the 3. We recently spent, over 160 million US refurbishing her, so she's absolutely magnificent, and we home port that ship there. But I know Steve Odell was on Cruise 360 last week, and he made an impassioned plea for the Sydney government, now that the pandemic is hopefully behind us, to reconsider alternatives. I think he liked the one in, I'm not going to pronounce it right. Yarra Bay, thank you, as an option. But quite frankly, Steve and I have an ongoing joke in private. Want to share that? No,
I'm not sure what the joke is, so we don't.
That we're both going to be old men in wheelchairs by the time the Australian government gets their act together to make that happen. And I don't mean to disparage anyone. I'm not sure there's a political will there to do something that's meaningful for the industry, unfortunately. So until that happens, it's hard to do more, but we are committed to the market, both as a sourcing market. We get fantastic guests. If you go back to my initial comments about guests traveling being good guests, well, if you live in Australia, you're used to traveling. We have some people from Australia, well, including you, right on this ship. This was a little bit of a trip, and really a beautiful location in Reykjavik, and plus the other places we're going to be seeing. So we're super committed to the market. It's one of our highest growing, one of our best markets, and considering the population of Australia, the fact that we generate nearly as much revenue from Australia as we do, for example, from the UK, which I think is a much, I don't know what the population is. Yeah, I was going to say 3x. Yeah, hard to remember every statistic. I think is a testament to how well our product is received and the traveling habits of the Australian community. And we're also committed to having the Spirit there, home porting in your summers, the northern winters. Plus we will have 1 to 2 ships in Asia, which is a little bit closer to home for the Australian market as well on a go-forward basis. So the Australian market was a really great market for us 2017, 18, 19. I mean, it was, again, considering the size of the population, I think there's 9 million people in Israel. It was a top 10 international market for us. I mean, worldwide, which is phenomenal. Israel took a little harder hit during these last 2 years than some other markets, specifically in the trade community. We've seen challenges in the trade community because the trade community is a lot of smaller companies that some of them didn't have access to capital markets and things like that during the pandemic, and we've seen a somewhat of a shrinkage. In many markets, we've now seen that start to come back. In fact, in some of our main markets like the US and the UK, we're almost back to the levels we had in 2019, which we think is fantastic. Israel took a little harder hit, and I'm not familiar enough with the economic policies of the various Prime Minister, as you guys change off in there, on what you did to support the trade and not, and I'm not here to comment on that, but the end result of that is the travel agency community fell much more dramatically in Israel than in some other places. Now we've seen it start to pick up now, just like in other places of the world, but I think Israel's going to have a little bit of a steeper curve because they came down a little bit further. So we're optimistic, we're fully committed to the market. You know, we have Nick, who looks over Israel and some of our other Middle Eastern markets. You know him well. He's there all the time. He does a fantastic job for us. I think he's there somewhere.
Right
Yeah. He says shalom. I think that's the only word of Hebrew he knows. And we continue to be committed. We did not remove any resources. We will continue to support the trade community there and do everything in our power to get that back up. We're committed to get Israel back up to be a top 10 market, which we'll get to maybe next year.
Absolutely.
Nick said absolutely. I take him at his word. Now, in terms of home boarding, we actually have the Epic, right, Nick? The Epic is going to be doing a turn in Haifa later. Our ship operations team doesn't know that yet, but we're going to do our best to make a go of it. We're going to continue to include Israel on a lot of our cruises, mainly out of Athens and Istanbul. It's a great product for our guests to visit. You know, not so much in July and August, because you might not know that, but it's super hot there in July and August. But we go there a lot in April, May, early June, and then again in September and October, around the holidays, or avoiding the holidays, I should say. But it's a popular market for our consumers, and we'll continue to go there. We really haven't seen a dramatic shift in guest expectations. Pre-pandemic, I like to say that perhaps my biggest learning, having run the international markets for all three of our brands for many years, I think we did that for 4 plus years, is that for the most part, people around the world are very, very similar. They at least the middle class, lower upper class, they work hard. They have families, and they want to take a few weeks every year to spend time with their families and friends and do something fun and enjoyable, take a break from their everyday life. And I'll tell you, whether it's an Asian, an Australian, an American, a Brit, a European, a Brazilian, a Mexican, it's pretty much the same. Work hard, earn money, pay your bills, live, and then take a few weeks a year to really enjoy yourself and do something special with your friends and family. And the Asian consumers that I've spoken to, that I've met in my travels, are the same. Perhaps they have slightly different tastes in where they want to travel and food choices and things like that, but that general premise remains. So we're off to do that. We want to provide the Asian consumers in the same way we provide consumers from all over the world with that type of experience. Now there's a few unique things. Asian consumers have slightly different culinary tastes, and we try to have so many different food options on board that no matter where you come from, you'll have something that you'll enjoy eating. We try to provide a broad variety of itineraries. So our cruises in Asia are not geared to Asians. Our cruises in Asia are geared for non-Asians, but our cruises in Europe and the United States and other places of the world are geared towards Asians, where they get in an airplane and they fly long distances to have wonderful vacations. So we get really, really good participation in Europe, probably our #1 destination for Asians, but also quite a few go to Alaska. It's a really beautiful place. I've been there like 4 or 5 times, maybe more. Probably a dozen times already, and every time I go, it's simply breathtaking. And specific from Japan, they really enjoy going to Hawaii. And of course, we have the only product there that operates 52 weeks a year. Port every day. It's a wonderful way to see the island, and the Japanese seem to enjoy that as well. We are committed to having a Prima class ship based in Southampton, as this one will be next year, for the foreseeable future. I think we've already announced our plans for 23 first, and 24, and in both years there's a Prima class ship. I think I know what we're going to do in 25, although we're not publishing that till November, and I'm pretty sure that we'll have a Prima class ship here in 25. My crystal ball doesn't go past that, but it's a very good market for us. But I'll tell you, consistent with the comments I made earlier, our goal is not to attract UK consumers to that cruise. Our goal is to attract, now there will be some UK consumers, I don't want to say that we don't want them, of course we want UK consumers, but I don't think they'll ever make up more than 10% of the passenger complement for a cruise like that. We are attracting people from Asia, Australia, the United States, the Middle East, the rest of Europe, Canada. If I miss anyone, I apologize in advance. I wasn't meaning to exclude anyone. To fly into London or to fly into Reykjavik and take the cruise, in one direction or the other. It's a beautiful itinerary. In terms of the UK market, I think Eamon had been running the UK market for us for a while prior to him taking on the mandate for all international. He did a really amazing job for us, growing the market. I think now we're better than 19 levels, right? Yeah, we're now at levels higher than 19 in the UK market, similar to the comment I made about the brand overall for quite some time now, for a few months already, and we continue to see huge potential. I mean, it's our largest. Well, I guess there's the United States, Canada, so UK is market number 3 for us, and we're very, very happy. We recently hired. Well, it's been a few months now. Gary, I forget Gary. Where's Gary? He decided not to come. We invited, what's his last name again?
Ansel.
Yeah, I can't pronounce that. Ainslow, Gary Ainslow. I just call him Gary. To look over the market for us, and he's under Eamon's direction has done a nice job picking up where Eamon left off. So South Africa was another one of those markets similar to Israel that was an overachiever for us coming into COVID. And they had slightly different challenges. They had trade challenges the same as everywhere else, not quite as dramatically as Israel. Their challenge more was they were treated a little bit differently, in my mind, unfairly. That there were travel restrictions for South Africa citizens a little bit more than other places around the world. That's now gone, but because of that, South Africa saw a little further dip in business, but is now coming back. I mean, I've been to South Africa myself, but we have some really great trade partners there that are huge supporters of us, that are now starting to rebuild again. We're seeing the business starting to come back, and we're very, very excited. In terms of a destination, because you told me I have to make this super quick, we take a ship to run South Africa cruises every year in South Africa's summer, South Africa's summer, which is the northern winters. We will continue to do that for this summer, next summer, the summer after, and when we send out our 24, 25 itineraries, I'm pretty sure we're going to have a ship there then too. So we will have a ship there, usually out of Cape Town, do some cruises around Mauritius, in that general area, for many, many years to come. We're very happy with those itineraries. Really was saddened when we had to send the crew home. I mean, it was a tremendous challenge back in, I remember we shut down March 13th, 2020. I remember the date. I think it'll always be seared in my mind that we made the decision and we immediately ceased operation. And our first thing was to get guests home, which took us like over a week, right? Because some of the ships were in remote places. We had one ship in the South Pacific at the time, and it was very difficult. Like we did like a big U-turn and finally wound up going to let the guests off in Hawaii. I was very thankful to the Hawaii governor for allowing us to debark, guests. It was late March by then. And then, we have 30-something thousand crew that we had to get home. And at least with the guests, there's like 5 or 6 countries where most of them come from. The crew we sourced from 70, 80 countries around the world. It was a real challenge, and it took us, I think, a full 3 months till we were able to repatriate all the guests home. It was a huge challenge, a huge expense, but obviously we had to do it. The crew is the lifeblood of the company. On the corporate side, we obviously sent everyone home. I'll tell you, Zoom on the one side is a miracle. Because if you think something like this would have happened 10 years ago, there would be no way that we would have connected at the level we did. But it's also a curse, because people think, okay, Zoom is the new thing. It's not. Zoom does not replace this type of person-to-person interaction. It can't. The casual conversations you have in the hallway, the conversations you have over a meal, the extended things. Zoom is good for a transaction. Zoom is not good for a relationship. And we are in the relationship business. We love to innovate. We love to move forward. It's hard to innovate on Zoom. So I'm respectful. Again, it's a bit of a miracle, because I think without Zoom, it would have been really challenging those first few months. But when we decided to put the ships back in the water to resume operations last July, we also returned everyone back to the office. And we've been now in the office for 13 months, and it works. It works. At first, everyone was masked, and we tested them once a week, and ultimately we loosen things up as we can, and now people just come. We have everyone in the office, and it's almost like the old days, but better, almost like the old days, but better. So I just want to start out by saying on the trade, we don't break out specific numbers, but I'd rather talk in principles anyway. We can't win without trade support. So I think we're reasonably good marketers, and obviously we do take some direct sales, but we have a community of thousands of travel agents throughout the world, really, really smart, accomplished business people that have unique business models to drive bookings to us, and the ones that we partner with, we probably have probably about 100 to 150 that we have deep partnership with, that we work with, day in and day out. Well, it's probably 100, 150 in the U.S. Probably worldwide is probably closer to 300 to 400, I should say. So let's just say 300 to 400 travel agencies worldwide that we partner with day in and day out. Many of them are on this cruise ship right now, pretty much all of them actually, to drive consumer demand, because ultimately that's what it's about, driving consumer demand to sell cruises. And I can say without hesitation, without caveat whatsoever, that they are a cornerstone to the success of this company. We couldn't do it without them.